Tonight on CFTK-TV, a new report on unregulated drug deaths, an increase in assault on healthcare workers from patients, and after almost a year, astronauts stranded in space return home.
Northwest BC's only television news team. We are CFTK-TV News.
Hello, I'm Damian Smith, and thank you for joining us here on CFTK-TV. We begin today with Skeena MLA Claire Rattay, who has once again spoken out in Parliament on the toxic drug crisis, and this time in regards to the BC budget. Here's Jaylene Matthews of CFTK-TV with more.
Skeena MLA Claire Rattay called out the new BC budget in legislature for its lack of supports in the toxic drug crisis.
On page 9 of the budget, the government proudly states, government continues to support the ongoing operations of over 3,600 treatment and recovery beds at over 300 health authority and community care facilities. Budget 2025 provides more than $500 million over the fiscal plan to support and sustain addictions treatment and recovery programs established through previous budgets. Notice support and sustain established through previous budgets. Let's be clear, this budget does not add a single new treatment bed, not a single one.
According to BC Emergency Health Services, in 2023, overdose and poisoning calls were up 25% from the previous year at 42,172 calls. That number dropped only slightly to 40,543 calls in 2024. Prior to 2016, overdose poisoning calls in BC fluctuated from 10 to 15,000 calls a year. In the Northern Health Region, BC EHS responded to 913 calls in 2016. That number has climbed year over year, and in 2024, BC EHS responded to 3,432 overdose poisoning calls. Since the public health emergency for toxic drugs was declared in 2016, BC EHS has seen a 110% total increase in annual overdose poisoning events.
This year alone, BC is set to spend $30 million on homeless encampment response teams, double the amount allocated for small business tax relief.
Rattay alleges the government is prioritizing bureaucracy over economic recovery while ignoring the root causes of homelessness and addiction.
Of the 458 deaths recorded among unhoused individuals in 2023, 86% were due to accidental drug toxicity. Nearly half of those who died were unsheltered men. The government claims to be addressing this crisis, yet there is no expansion of treatment beds and no funding for long-term recovery programs. Their failure to act is costing lives.
For CFTK-TV News in Terrace, I'm Jaylene Matthews.
And the City of Terrace recently announced that improvements will be coming soon to the Wolfpack Trail that is located on Terrace Mountain. As a means of improving safety as well as the general experience of hiking on the trail, Terrace will be working with several partners to separate sections of the trail so that people who use it for hiking and others who use it for biking can do so without the worry of getting in each other's way. Other parts of the work being done should include the addition of signage alongside some upgrades that will be done to the Johnstone trailhead. And ever since several sculptures imitating a pack of wolves were added to the trail, its popularity has increased, further emphasizing the importance of making sure everyone is safe when interacting with the trail. Moving on to federal news, the latest development of Prime Minister Carney sees himself in a unique financial situation in which he had assets that he owned before becoming the leader of the country. There happens to be steps that need to be taken. Here's Rachel Aiello from CTV News.
So they've been disposed.
Prime Minister Mark Carney was pressed again today to proactively disclose details about the assets he has divested into a blind trust.
What happens is that there's a discussion with the Ethics Commissioner for certain screens around certain issues, and that's a process that is underway.
This after a testy back and forth with reporters on the topic yesterday.
What potential conflicts of interest you sought to avoid?
What possible conflict would you have, Stephanie? I'm complying with the rules.
That was an exchange Conservatives pounced on today.
The question is, why is he so defensive when he's asked?
Canada's conflict of interest rules state the Prime Minister is not allowed to own controlled assets, such as stocks or bonds, whose value could directly or indirectly be affected by government decisions or policy. The rules require he divest by either selling or placing them in a blind trust. The Federal Ethics Commissioner's office confirms Carney has been in touch. In a statement, a spokesperson said Carney has 60 days to disclose to the commissioner all his assets, liabilities, income, and outside activities, and that the office would also work with him on publishing a summary of his personal and financial information within 120 days.
I'll speak to you after.
But as reporters have pressed him on, 120 days could very likely be after the federal election.
Assets that are placed in a blind trust are known to the office holder until they are liquidated. So for whatever length of time that is, a blind trust is not really blind.
Shedding some light on the Prime Minister's past holdings, Brookfield Asset Management's latest annual report shows that before he quit to launch his leadership bid, Carney held $6.8 million in stock options at his former firm. Today, he vowed to remove himself from any decisions related to that firm.
And those working in healthcare are seeing an increase in assaults from patients, and according to some, this is only the tip of the iceberg. Here is Penny Daflos down in Vancouver.
From the emergency department to public areas and family doctors' offices, it's not unusual for healthcare workers to face violence.
Anger to the point of pushing, shoving, hitting of our physicians and our staff, even in our family medicine clinics, our maternity clinics.
Inappropriate comments, touching, unwanted advances, and even just assaults in the back of the ambulance.
There was a nurse the other night that was actually choked unconscious. And so what the media is reporting on, I would say, is a fraction of what's actually taking place.
Mounties are recommending charges after a man allegedly punched a nurse at Langley Memorial Hospital this month, but criminal charges for assaults against healthcare workers are unusual.
We definitely need a zero tolerance policy in place. And we need more security, particularly in our hospitals, our emergency rooms, and our clinics.
There needs to be a level of accountability where if somebody is abusive or assaults a first responder, whether it's a paramedic, firefighter, or even a police officer, there needs to be accountability.
The BC Prosecution Service tells CTV News, unlike assaults against police officers, incidents against healthcare workers or in medical settings aren't in a special category in their system. Anecdotally, violent incidents on the job are increasing.
The patient came out wielding a machete, waving it in the air, yelling and screaming at us.
In a statement to CTV News, the Attorney General described an assault on a healthcare worker as a serious criminal offense and that health authorities have increased the number of security staff at hospitals.
If it is not safe for healthcare workers to do their job, it's actually not safe for the patients either.
A warning healthcare workers will continue to deliver as they remain in the line of fire. Penny Daflos, CTV News, Vancouver.
Coming up next, much like the trading status, tourism in Victoria sees less Canadians crossing the border. Welcome back to CFTK-TV. Well, more word about the evolving dust advisory situation in northern BC has emerged, and according to the BC Ministry of Environment and Parks, the dust advisory that was into place for Houston yet again has now been lifted, while the one in place for Burns Lake is still hanging around for the time being. People that have medical issues that involve the respiratory system are still being advised to avoid physical activity that is deemed as seriously straining. And down on the island, Victoria finds itself in a different position when relating to tourism, where usually at this point in time they would have Canadians traveling down to the United States by their ferry service. But this time around, they are seeing more Canadians and Americans staying within the Canadian border. Here's CTV's Robert Buffalo.
The Coho ferry is only 2/3 full as it leaves Victoria for Port Angeles. Normally, it would be packed with British Columbians heading to the States for spring break.
And we're down approximately 20% in Canadians.
In the capital city's inner harbor, the tourists are mostly Canadian.
Chatwin, BC.
Calgary, Alberta.
We're from Edmonton.
Collingwood, Ontario.
From Winnipeg. We're here to enjoy the flowers and the restaurants and the pubs.
Vacationers like the Browns choosing to travel domestically because of the low Canadian dollar, and especially the trade war with the States.
Every year we'd go 2 or 3 times down to the States to visit our daughter. Not anymore. She's coming up to visit us.
no sense making nice when they're not playing nice.
BC Ferries was slammed Tuesday, 5 sailing waits in the morning to Swartz Bay as British Columbians stuck around the province for spring break holidays.
We've heard stories about exchange rate horrors and tariffs and stuff.
U.S. Customs stats show there were nearly 500,000 fewer land border crossings to the U.S. by Canadians this February compared to last. But the Trump tariff tension hasn't discouraged Americans from coming up here. Bookings by U.S. tourists at this Victoria hotel are up 30 to 40% through the summer.
The dollar is certainly helping us attract Americans, particularly from our close neighboring states.
The combo of Canadians sticking close to home and Americans continuing to travel north means a boon for BC's tourism industry, including in Tofino, where reservations are generally up through the summer.
It's a fortunate mix, actually. I'm more fortunate than most industries, certainly those that are export-oriented industries in our country.
As tariff threats and reaction to them help make BC's tourism industry bloom this spring.
And now we take a look at the local weather forecast for tonight and for the week ahead. Tonight on the north coast, it should have some rain ending later in the evening, followed by a 30% chance of showers with about 5 to 10 millimeters in total. Winds should be coming from the southeast at 30 kilometers per hour, increasing to 90 over the coastal sections earlier in the evening, and the low should be +3. This week should see showers for the next couple of days, and then rain starting on the weekend, which should be heading into next week as well. The high will be 8 degrees on Sunday and Monday, while the low will be 3 degrees tomorrow evening. Tonight in Terrace and Kitimat, there should be periods of rain ending overnight, followed by cloudy conditions with a 60% chance of rain showers or wet flurries. Winds should be coming from the south at 30 kilometers per hour, increasing to 50 after midnight, and the low should be +1. And for this week, Terrace and Kitimat has a chance of flurries or snow for the next couple of days, followed by rainier conditions heading into the weekend. Don't expect any sunny weather as well for the rest of the week. The high will be 7 degrees on Sunday and Monday, while the low will be 2 degrees for the next 4 nights. Tonight in the Bulkley Valley should see a few showers, flurries later in the evening as well, and then cloudy conditions with a 40% chance of flurries overnight. The low should be at around 0 degrees, and the Bulkley Valley will see a couple of days sun for this week, followed by some showers on Saturday and a chance of snow on Sunday. The high will be 9 degrees on Sunday, while the low will be -4 on Friday night. And now we take a look at your roadside report from around the Northwest. For additional updates, check out drybc.ca. Highway 16 has utility work east of Rainbow Lake, construction work north of Usk, utility work in Endako and slippery sections. Highway 37 has roadside brushing north of Lake Kells Lake, slippery sections from Kitwanga to Dease Lake, and compact snow from Dease Lake to the Yukon border. Highway 37A has slippery sections, and Telegraph Creek Road has compact snow and muddy sections. And these are what the cameras were looking like from around the Northwest. Still to come, how tariffs will combine with inflation to affect the Canadian economy. Hello again. Well, Prime Minister Carney was in Iqaluit just yesterday to give an announcement on the development of a new radar system that can help Canada with potential threats to the north. Michael Couture was on site to document the process.
With much of the focus on securing Canada's southern border with the United States, Prime Minister Mark Carney came north to send that same message of sovereignty, while at the same time announcing an increased presence of Canada's military in Iqaluit. Carney announced the allocation of $6 billion in a partnership with Australia for an over-the-horizon radar system that can provide early warning coverage from the Canada-US border all the way up to the Arctic. Canadian officials who briefed reporters described the system as the most sophisticated available. It's able to detect hypersonic missiles, and this system could be in place by 2029. In the meantime, the Prime Minister says Canada does need to increase military spending.
We will need to do more. We will do it deliberately. We will do it in a way that gets effective value for money.
The Canadian government is also spending $253 million to upgrade power plants, accelerate housing, and to help complete the first phase of a hydroelectricity facility in Nunavut. Carney also announced an enhanced year-round presence of the Canadian Armed Forces in the Arctic. Right now, the military has year-round operations in Alert here in Nunavut, but there will be other locations that have yet to be determined. Speaking on background, officials told reporters the partnership with Australia shouldn't be seen as a slight to the Americans, as the U.S. military approves of the radar system. But it's unclear what the reaction will be from Donald Trump. Now, today's announcement was already part of a larger plan to modernize NORAD, so it won't move the needle on Canada's plan to hit its NATO targets. Michael Couture, CTV News, Iqaluit.
And the Canadian dollar will be heavily watched over the next month or so before Donald Trump plans to implement full-on tariffs on April 2nd, and the Bank of Canada has stated that there is little that they can do to keep inflation down. Judy Trinh has more over in Ottawa.
The cost of basic goods in Canada was 2.6% more expensive in February compared to the same period last year, a spike that apprentice roofer Charles Glandon feels in his pocketbook.
I have 4 small children, and it's hard.
And it's going to get harder. February's inflation rate didn't factor in the trade war with the U.S. and the weakened Canadian dollar.
We are now facing a new crisis.
The impact will be across the board, from autos to agriculture, and not just from the United States. On Thursday, China will impose 100% tariffs on canola to retaliate for Canada's previous decision to put 100% duties on Chinese electric vehicles. Then on April 2nd, the Trump administration is expected to announce global reciprocal tariffs.
We will forge ahead, with or without the United States. We have a big task in front of us.
The federal government is trying to increase trade with other countries and between provinces, but that's a strategy that could take years, while these apprentices are already seeing some work dry up.
Some of our insulation and pro board and all that has been a back order, so it slows down jobs.
$6 billion in tariff relief has been announced for businesses, including a work-sharing program to avoid layoffs. But union leaders say more employment support is needed.
We need changes to EI to make it easier to collect. We need to make sure that EI is, once you're eligible, you can collect it longer. We need to make sure that separation monies aren't considered earnings that delay the time period in which you can collect EI.
This spike in inflation means it's less likely that the Bank of Canada will cut its rates next month.
And now we take a look at the stock market, where we're seeing increases in the index category today. The Canadian dollar is down 1/10 of a penny. The price of gold is up 40 cents. Oil is up 14 cents. Natural gas is up 20 cents. And aluminum is down $34.50. In Toronto, the TSX is up 363 points. The Venture Index is up 7. In New York, NASDAQ is up 246. And the Dow Jones is up 383. Still ahead, another call from President Donald Trump and Vladimir Putin, including speculation on a ceasefire. Welcome back to our final segment. We have more developments between Donald Trump and Vladimir Putin, as both country leaders spoke over the phone for over 2 hours to dispute the war between Russia and Ukraine. The word ceasefire was mentioned, but no official agreements were made in the process. Here's Joy Malvin of CTV News.
President Donald Trump in a high-stakes phone call to broker a peace deal, something he promised he could do in just 24 hours.
But it's a bad situation in Russia, and it's a bad situation in Ukraine.
Calling his 2-hour marathon call with Russia's Vladimir Putin a very good and productive one, where the leaders agreed Ukraine and Russia would stop attacking energy infrastructure for 30 days, and negotiations would begin for a maritime ceasefire in the Black Sea. Not a full ceasefire that Ukraine has already signed on to, but relief in a war that has already cost thousands of lives. Visiting a military cemetery, President Volodymyr Zelensky honoring the soldiers killed after Russia invaded. Zelensky wasn't part of that phone call and doesn't trust Putin. He wants a conversation with Trump, adding he supports any kind of halt to the fighting.
It looks like that Putin outwitted Trump in this call by being able to agree to a very modest measure. That's the cessation of attacks on infrastructure and energy sources. And there will be advantages for Ukraine if its nuclear and other facilities were not targeted by Russia.
Putin seemed to give just enough for Trump to call this a win, but demands a complete stop of all military aid to Ukraine. European leaders call the talks a good start, but they had no input either, skeptical of President Trump's warming relationship with Russia.
Putin, I don't think will stop until he is stopped. Any concession you give him, it's not going to warm his heart. He's just going to pocket that concession and demand more.
Despite Putin's pledge and a promise of a prisoner exchange tomorrow, the fighting still continues on the front lines.
And after NASA launched a crew into space last summer, the problems did arise along the way, and the company was forced to keep the astronauts out in the middle of nowhere for almost a year in time. But just yesterday, they landed safe and sound. Here's Heather Wright, who has our final story of the day.
An 8-day trip to space ended with a splash tonight, 286 days later.
And splashdown, Crew 9 back on Earth.
A SpaceX capsule carrying Sonny Williams and Butch Wilmore touched down in the calm waters of the Gulf of Mexico, concluding a saga that began last June. That's when the pair took off from Cape Canaveral, the first 2 astronauts to be carried into space on Boeing's Starliner, a crucial test for the company in order for its capsule to receive NASA approval for routine flights.
Let's get going.
But issues with Starliner's propulsion system led to cascading delays in getting home.
Merry Christmas!
As weeks stretched to months, NASA made the decision to bring them home on a SpaceX craft as part of the regular crew rotation schedule.
Butch and Sonny will return with Crew 9 next February, and that Starliner will return uncrewed.
The failed test mission was a blow to Boeing's space unit, which has struggled to compete with Elon Musk's SpaceX Crew Dragon. The situation even became political when U.S. President Donald Trump and his close advisor Musk tried to place blame on former President Joe Biden for the failed mission without giving any evidence.
Posing for some final photos.
And so today, in their re-entry suits, Wilmore and Williams posed for a few last photos before beginning the 17-hour journey back to Earth.
Wow, we got a cute little pod of dolphins. It wasn't just 1 or 2.
A pod of dolphins capping off a homecoming 9 months in the making. Heather Wright, CTV News, Toronto.
That'll be all for the cast tonight. Thank you very much for watching, and have a good rest of your evening.